Hello, I'm Andrew Fryer, an evangelist at Microsoft in the UK. In this screencast, I want to have a look at the new AlwaysOn feature in SQL Server 2012. AlwaysOn is a combination of clustering and mirroring and creates all sorts of interesting high availability scenarios that we've not had before. Perhaps the best way to understand what it is to set it up. I've got 5 virtual machines running here, my domain controller, 3 machines Denali 1, 2 and 3, and a Windows 7 client, Tangerine. The Denali machines are all running Windows Server 2008 R2, and I've already installed a normal install of SQL Server 2012 on each of those, i.e. I haven't used the cluster install. The only other thing I've done to these 3 virtual machines before starting is install the failover clustering feature. And if I open Server Manager on one of these, you can see that we have the failover cluster manager here. And from here I can now create a cluster. First I need to select my servers, and I'll browse for those. It'll be those 3 Denali machines I showed you earlier. Now I can give my cluster a name. I get a confirmation screen of what I want to do. I click Next, and I'm creating my cluster. Now that's all pretty straightforward, and the reason it's much more straightforward than normal is because I haven't set up any shared storage yet. And actually for AlwaysOn, we don't need shared storage, as we'll see as we go through this exercise. So our cluster's now been completed. I can click Finish, and we can have a look at it. You can see my 3 nodes here. It's found that I've got 2 networks and there's no shared storage. Before I continue, I just want to fiddle around with the networking that I have set up here, because by default the cluster wizard has set up the wrong network as being the network that we communicate on. So now I've got an IP address that reflects my internal network, 10.10.10.161. That's all I need to do with clustering. Everything else is done from within inside SQL Server. So I'm going to flip over now to my Windows 7 environment, Tangerine, where I've got SQL Server Management Studio open. And you can see that I've got SQL Server installed on all 3 of those nodes. From here I can also view my registered servers. I've registered each of the 3 virtual machines so that I can connect to them quickly, and more importantly hit right click and bring up SQL Server Configuration Manager. Actually I've got these open down here. The reason I want to do that is because I want to modify the SQL Server service on each of those nodes now. I right click on it, click Properties, and you can see we've got this new tab, AlwaysOn High Availability. When I select that, you can see the name of the cluster I've just created, TechNet, and now I can enable AlwaysOn availability groups on that cluster. I hit OK. It says I need to restart, so I will. And now I'm going to do the same on each of these 3 nodes. Now, of course, it is possible to do all of that in PowerShell. So I've now got my 3 nodes back online, now enabled for AlwaysOn. You can see here on Denali 2 that I've got 2 databases, part of a reporting services demo that I give about bird strikes in the US, and I'm going to make those highly available. Under Management here, you can see I've got a new Availability Groups option. If I right click on this, I can bring up the new Availability Group wizard. I need to give it a name. I'll call it UK. I can select my databases here and here. Notice they both meet my prereqs, and those prereqs are the same as for mirroring. In other words, they need to be in full recovery mode and I need to have made a backup of them. Now I can choose which nodes I want to work with. I'm using the beta CTP3 of SQL Server 2012, so I can only add in another replica at this point in time. When this goes live, you'll be able to add a lot more in. So I'll add in Denali 3, and I'll set it up for automatic failover. Notice I've got some options here. And what I can do here is I can allow read-only connections to the secondary. And that's a departure from mirroring, because what I can do now is use that secondary without having to muck about with snapshots and so on and so forth. You can see the commonality with mirroring here because we have endpoints using the same ports as mirroring would normally use, 5022. So remember to open those up on your firewall. I can also add a DHCP availability group listener to create a client connection point to this availability group. We'll leave the default of UK listener, and we can see how that plays out in a minute. The other thing I've done is I've shared the backup directory where I backed up those two databases in order to prepare for this demo. And then I've shared that out so that the other nodes can see that share and thus restore from that backup. That's passed all my validation tests. Now I can actually execute it. That's completed successfully. And I can also see how my new availability group is performing because I can also bring up this dashboard of it. And we can see exactly what's going on here. The database is showing up on both sides. We can also see now that Denali 3 is showing up as restoring, much as you'd expect for mirroring. The other thing I can also do is connect to that listener. And what that means is that any kind of connection we make to SQL Server now, from whatever application, can see the availability group. So we're not limited in the way that we were when we set mirroring up. And so you can see the two databases are under here. So that's a quick introduction to AlwaysOn and how to set it up. I've been Andrew Fryer. Thank you very much for listening.